Welcome to the first LBG review to Sleep 2. How this will work is I will talk about a game in extreme detail, in a very calm voice, with ocean waves or other calming sound effects and music to help you fall asleep as you listen to my voice. Today we will be discussing While the Iron's Hot. While the Iron's Hot is a game where you play as a blacksmith in training. However, unfortunately for you, your hometown does not really have that many opportunities for a blacksmith to prove themselves. But you hear about a magical place called Elian, where artisans from around the world have traveled to prove their worth and to obtain the status of being a legendary craftsman. One day, you hear about how there's some sailors that have come to port in your hometown. They mention that they're from Elian and that they're just getting supplies before they head back home. You walk up to the sailors, you explain to the captain that you're a blacksmith in training, and he agrees to take you on board as long as you're willing to work on the ship until you get to Elian. Then, while you're on the ship, you go to sleep and are woken up by a man named Gilly. Gilly explains that the captain wants to see you, but that before you can go see the captain, that rough waters have broken the ladder up to the top deck. But before Gilly will fix the ladder, he needs your help finding his sailor's journal, and that he asks you not to read it. Getting up out of bed, you see that there's a chest not too far from the bed, but it's locked with a combination. You also can talk to Gilly, and he'll remind you that you can't go up and talk to the captain without helping him with his journal. You can talk to another sailor who's counting up boxes of inventory, and then is surprised when there's an extra box. There's a few other people you can talk to, but it's not hard to find Gilly's journal. Now, While the Iron's Hot is full of minute choices. Some of these choices will have large-scale ramifications for the rest of the game. Other choices have minor impacts on the game. One of those minor choices is whether or not you choose to open up Gilly's journal. If you do, you find out the combination for the chest in the lower deck, but Gilly will be upset with you and will basically give you a little trinket to remind you of betraying his trust. Whereas if you don't read it, he'll give you a trinket to remind you of him. Regardless of what choice you make though, the combination on the lock never changes playthrough to playthrough. So as a result, even if you don't read it, you can still get into the chest if you remember the lock combination. The chest contains a few blueprints, a little bit of money, and a note from the captain of the ship basically calling out Gilly for opening up the treasure chest. Because inside Gilly's journal is actually a journal entry about how the captain entrusted him with the combination to the chest that contains the captain's wealth, and that Gilly has swore he will never open it. But when you open the chest, you find that the captain's letter reads that he knew that Gilly would never resist the opportunity to get treasure. The captain will now be keeping his eye on Gilly. From there, though, you take the journal back to Gilly. Gilly says thank you either way, puts a box in front of the ladder to allow you to crawl up onto the box to use the ladder. Up on the top deck, the captain talks to you a little bit about being a blacksmith, about how Elian really hasn't had a blacksmith in a while. And then he says, but for now, you're part of my crew, so go to the bow of the ship and raise the sail, because we're coming into port. After a bit of confusion, where the main character explains that they don't know what the bow of the ship is, and then the captain tells them the bow is the front of the ship, now go. Once you get to the bow of the ship, you hear loud explosions, and then all of a sudden you wake up in an unknown bed. But the game's cutscenes show you that the ship was destroyed and that a one-armed man who was going fishing at the time managed to save you. The 1 hour man, when you get out of bed, introduces himself as Driston. When you ask Driston where you are, he mentions that you're on Elian, and then when you mention that, wow, that's really a stroke of luck because I was trying to go to Elian, Driston asks you, now why were you trying to come here? He also asks about the hammer on your apron. You explain to him that you're a blacksmith and that you wanted to come to Elian to prove yourself. Driston gets extremely excited and explains that Elian has not had a blacksmith in a long time, and that with you here, that things might be able to take a turn for the better. So, Driston takes you over to the forge, which is in ruins, and then has you go over to the construction table back by the house that you woke up in, and explains that you can restore the forge to a minimal working order with that table over there. Going over to the table and repairing the forge, Driston then gives you your first task. Make him a new butter knife because a rat ran off with his old one. Now, in While the Iron is Hot, forging is a simple but also challenging process. Putting metal ore into the furnace is relatively simple, but then pounding the metal into the shape you need is a bit more tricky because you have to select the shape that you want and then hammer away the sections that aren't in that shape. But before you can get hammering away on metal, you have to first get iron ore. Driston points you to a local mine that's been abandoned for some time. So when you go there to gather ore, initially it seems all straightforward and hunky-dory. However, as you explore the mine and gather more and more ore, when you eventually think that you have run out of room to gather ore, as you begin to make your way back to the entrance of the mines, you are stopped by a shady character named Sneaky Sam. Sneaky Sam is agitated about why you are there, begins asking questions about what you saw and that you've seen too much, and begins to try to attack you, but as you back up onto a rickety old wooden bridge, the bridge collapses beneath you both. You manage to come out unscathed. Sneaky Sam, not as much. Dusting yourself off from the fall and investigating Sneaky Sam's body, you find a note from his superiors explaining that his reward for his previous job is waiting inside the mines, and that Sneaky Sam really should get good about not losing his membership ring, and that a replacement can also be found within the mines. Exploring the mines further, you find much more iron ore, as well as a chest, which is locked with a combination that you can find back on Sneaky Sam's letter, as well as another chest that contains the Sneaky Society ring. The other chest contains a bunch of iron bars, a few pieces of iron that have already been forged into various shapes, as well as a lot of metal and blueprints for crafting various other shapes and objects. Getting back to Driston, though, as you leave the mines and head back to the blacksmith town called Stall, you begin to lose your energy as traveling through Elian is challenging, as would traveling through any land on foot. Arriving back in Stall with Driston, when you use the ore to make the butter knife for Driston, once you make the butter knife for Driston, after a good night's sleep because traveling on foot would be tiring, Driston remarks that the butter knife makes his other butter knife look like a toothpick. Then he tells you that you should probably get some more rest, as now that you've proven yourself to him, that he's sure that the orders will be flowing in. The next morning, when you talk to Dristan explains that he wants you to go over to a nearby town named Strad. He explains that Strad is the town of the lumberjacks, and that he showed his new butter knife to their leader named Myrtle. Myrtle was extremely impressed with Dristan's butter knife, but wanted to see your skills for herself. Traveling over to Strad, you get stopped by a man wielding a spear wearing an iron helmet. When you explain that you're the blacksmith that Myrtle was told about, the guard named Ash lets you in without further questioning. When you ask him how will you know when you see Myrtle, Ash responds, she's the lady wielding a massive axe. Once you find Myrtle, she tells you that to prove yourself to her, she wants you to make her a hammer and a set of nails, so that way she can rebuild the town's notice board, where the townsfolk will make requests of you to forge various items for them. Forging the hammer is fairly straightforward, as you only need a 2x2 iron plate and a log. The set of nails are also fairly straightforward, as you only need 3 1x1 iron strips, each sharpened at the grindstone. Once you have the hammer and nails, and you take them back to Myrtle, she marvels at their craftsmanship and then tells you that a young boy named Splinter wants to talk to you before you leave town. Splinter is a young boy with black hair that runs around with a wooden sword and a wooden shield. Splinter explains that he wants to be a knight like Ash when he grows up, and that he wants a helmet just like Ash's, and he was wondering if you could go talk to Ash to maybe look at Ash's helmet to make him one just like it. When you approach Ash about this proposition, Ash exclaims that he can do you one better, as his father, before he passed, still had the blueprints for Ash's helmet, and he gives you the blueprints so you can make Splinter a helmet as well. The helmet recipe is fairly straightforward. It is a 2x2 iron plate, 2 1x2 iron plates, and a 1x2 curved iron plate. Making the helmet and then taking it back to Splinter in Strad. Splinter thanks you profusely for giving him his new helmet, and then tells you that Myrtle told him to let you know that the notice board is up and running, and that he thinks he saw some people hanging up notices on it already. So, accepting the notices that you can go back to Stall and begin working on them. But look at the time. Isn't it about time for you to rest your head on a nice soft pillow and let the thoughts and stresses of the day melt away as you listen to the ocean waves? I hope you have enjoyed coming with me to Elian. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to me talking about blacksmithing and legendary craftsmen. I will try to make stories like this one to come out every other week. So stay tuned for part 2 of While the Iron's Hot. Good night. Sleep tight. Don't let anything bite. And may you wake up well rested and ready for the day ahead.